with the demise of the Spartan Mills and the subsequent demise of the mill village around it, the entire area of the north side was really at risk. And when VCOM decided to come, it encouraged a lot of institutions to really look at how we could lever that investment, that $28–30 million investment in this beautiful space we call VCOM today, into something special for the entire community. So the Dupree House is icing on the cake. It's another historic effort to restore a very important part of our community that was once very vibrant, very healthy, had fallen on difficult times. And the renovation and rebirth of the Dupree House is just a great example of the same kind of energy and effort that's going on across the face of the north side.
I'd like to introduce you to the Duncan Dupree House. It's part of the VCOM campus now. The house is known as the Duncan Dupree House because it was originally built and completed in 1887 by William Wallace Duncan, who graduated from Wofford.
William Wallace Duncan came to Wofford in 1854 when Wofford first started. After graduating from Wofford in 1858, went into the Methodist ministry, and shortly thereafter came the Civil War, and he went and served as a chaplain in the Confederate Army. On the other hand, we come from a tradition of medicine established by Andrew Taylor Still. He too served in the Civil War as a physician on the Union side. William Wallace Duncan was the professor of mental and moral philosophy at Wofford, and he held that position as well as an administrative role in finance. But he had the opportunity and was elected to serve as the bishop for the Methodist Episcopal Church South. And in order to take on that position, he had to leave his home on the Wofford campus.
Well, the house was built in 1885. My dad was born in the house, 1889, I think it was. It was right next to Floyd's Mortuary. If you go to the Marriott Hotel, it was basically in the lobby. Architect lived in Atlanta. He was the architect of the old opera house here in town that burned.
He started this house when he was still a Methodist minister, and during the 2 years of construction, he became a bishop. And so his wife convinced him that they would need a larger dining room for entertaining people. And so a large dining room was added to the back of the house.
When the bishop was in session, all the conferences for the Northern Methodist Church were held at Wofford College. And then when they wanted to get down to business, they would come over to this house.
Bishop Duncan had 3 children. His first son was Thomas, and he married a woman from Union, and they moved to Union and lived in a large antebellum home in Union. But his second born, Caroline, who went by Carrie, she married this fellow by the name of Wallace Dupree. And Carrie inherited this home in 1914, and they moved into the home, and then it became known as the Dupree home. And a Dupree has lived in this house from 1914 all up to the 1970s.
Grandmother was living then. Grandfather died during the Spanish flu in World War I. And grandmother lived there, and my mother and dad lived there, and I was a late comer. They'd been married 9 years when I arrived. And the Depression started, the stock market fell on October the 29th, and I was born on November the 2nd. The bishop died in 1908. That's when the house suddenly got electrified, and they put in a furnace that steam heat into the modern era. Actually, this house was saved by Arthur Cleveland when he was building the Marriott Hotel. We thought when we sold it to him that he was going to have to tear it down, but he didn't.
The Dupree House sat where the Marriott Hotel sits today. And as part of the plan to take that space and turn it into a bustling hotel, there was a need to do something with the Dupree House. So the developer of the hotel, Arthur Cleveland, instead of tearing the building down, decided at some great expense to move it.
It took them 2 days to move it over here, and the Southern Railway had to stop traffic for about an hour while they crossed the tracks.
And I can recall very vividly the day they began to move it, and of course you had to take your time through the city streets. You had to move traffic lights, you had to move electrical wires.
They had to take up all the crossing gates and a lot of the telephone poles and stuff. The guy that moved it was from Louisville, Kentucky. He had some big old I-beams that he'd bought from Cape Canaveral that they used to move the space shuttles on. And they put these I-beams under the house, and they had 24 sets of landing gear, aircraft landing gear under there that were pneumatic, and a computer ran them to keep the house level as they moved it. And it moved a good, I guess half a mile an hour or something like that, if that much.
It took a couple of days, and it was really a happening for a lot of people in our community. I remember taking our kids and watching some of that take place.
The only damage we had, I think, was the weather vane got knocked off the top of the house by a tree limb out here as they were turning the corner to come in here.
Nobody really knew what was going to happen with it. The plan was for it to be renovated by the developer. It didn't turn out that way.
I believe the city had committed to restore it, but unfortunately, I think after they moved it, they didn't have the money to restore it. So we worked out a deal with the city where we essentially purchased it for a nominal price and decided to restore it and preserve it for Spartanburg.
We have felt very much a part of the North Side development, and not just the campus. Of course, we have so many acres that we have transformed.
My sister and I both just love the Dupree House, and she actually wrote me a letter, and in the letter she specifically said that she wanted to help with the restoration of the Dupree House. After VCOM got the house, they started restoring it, and so most people thought it was restored. But I started asking the questions and found out that the inside had not been done. And so that's when we got involved with talking to VCOM about getting it restored.
We're working on a renovation to restore the inside to its original grandeur. And let's go have some fun. Take a look. It's interesting, these panels were reproductions from original photographs of the home. So these are not original, but original copies.
Best I remember, we lived upstairs, and Grandma ran the house and didn't want anybody in the kitchen. And so my mother loved the garden, so she had the outside and Grandma had the inside.
We're now standing in the large dining room that the Reverend Duncan, the Bishop Duncan's wife, insisted on having added onto the home because of they would be entertaining so much. What I'd like to show you here is this is the recessed buffet area in the dining room. In the older homes, you can't see it right now because we've taken the ceiling piece out, but these arches here created an area where the heat from the food on the buffet would rise up and over the diners, so it kept the dining room cool without air conditioning.
They were still building the house when they found out he was going to be bishop, so they had to add this dining room to entertain with. So it was added at the same time the house was built.
The basket weave woodwork shown here is another typical feature of a Queen Anne Victorian home in the 1880s that you won't find anywhere else. To restore this piece, we will be taking it down in one piece and using a chemical vat to dissolve the paint and set it back up and stain it.
Every once in a while at night or during the daytime on the weekend, a little couple would appear at the door wanting to get married. And the bishop would have them sit in here while he talked to them, and then he would take them in there. He'd marry them and send them on their way. This is the parlor.
Parlor, yeah.
And it had the painted ceiling. And the grandfather clock stayed right in this corner, had a sign hanging on it that says, "Wine me Wednesdays." This is the room I remember the best. It was, when I was little, they had the floor painted green. And we'd use chalk, and we'd draw all sorts of roads and rivers and stuff on there.
What you're looking at here is several layers of wallpaper from the nursery. This room was the nursery upstairs. And you see underneath the vertical striped wallpaper a picture of a train, and then there's horse and carriage up above that. When I brought Wallace Dupree through here, he said this was his room when he was a baby.
They used to sit up here, I think, on the porch back then was tin, not copper. This house had the first indoor plumbing in Spartanburg County. It was upstairs and 22 steps to get up there, and you better plan ahead.
This space, this bathroom, had the first indoor plumbing in Spartanburg County. Where I'm standing was a huge clawfoot tub, which we'll look at in a moment, and a toilet with a gravity tank mounted to the wall above your head. This was a large clawfoot tub. Oddly enough, it had a mahogany rim around the tub, I guess for comfort and for looks. In 1914, Carrie Dupree inherited this home from her dad. Being a modern-day woman in the 19-teens, she wanted to have a bathroom in her master bedroom. So this bathroom was added on, and you can imagine it was probably an architect's nightmare to add a rectangular box onto a curved surface of a turret. From the outside, you can see what we mean. Very modern for its time, not so modern today.
And this house is kind of innovative. Before this time, they didn't have closets. This was one of the early days that they put in closets. They see that one sort of just stuck there. The one back in this other room was triangular. This is where they did the entertaining in here. I remember they had an S-shaped chair that one seat fixed this way, another seat fixed, it was curved like an reverse S. And Mac's mother and father, I think, did most of the courting on that chair. I was a year and 51 weeks to the day younger than Mac. And he was my only first cousin.
Oh, I see.
He's got a lot more first cousins than I do. I remember there was a family tradition that we'd all go down to Aunt Fanny's in Union for Thanksgiving. And then we'd come up here, and I believe we went out to your house, your folks' house, for Christmas, and then we'd come over to my house at New Year's.
You got a good memory.
No, it comes and goes.
I came over here for birthday parties, and after Mac and I were married, our first child was Marguerite Dupree, after the Dupree House, or Dupree, whatever you want to say.
Depends on whether you live on Otis Boulevard or live on North Church Street, whether it's Dupree or Dupree.
Oh, I see. Or whether you live in France, I think that's it. When Dupree was about 2 or 3 years old, we came over here to birthday parties. Mrs. Dupree, Miss Carrie, we called her. She would give the most wonderful birthday parties here. Where was the little sink back here that we used to hide? And I think you asked me to come back there with I like a little swiggle. And I said yes. Miss Carrie was a wonderful person, and even though I didn't go to the Methodist church, I remember she used to play the organ over there all the time. She's quite talented.
And believe it or not.
Yeah, that's right, she was.
She played the organ or something for 25 years.
Oh, 67, I think it was. Choir practice was every Wednesday night in this room. And my bedroom was right up there. So I didn't get to sleep till after choir practice because there were 2 or 3 voices in there that could shake the room.
How many Victorian houses are still left in Spartanburg? Because most of them been torn down. And this one still stands, thank goodness, after it was debated whether it was be torn down or moved again. I think it's fantastic that somebody picked it up.
It really is.
Poor little kitten.
We just wonder sometimes if the bishop didn't have some influence on getting the house moved to this particular spot so that VCOM could take care of it, because it was a dead duck, I'm sure, if it stayed where it was.
And now it's being nourished.
And this area is building up nice, whereas before there was a cotton warehouses behind us
and the railroad
on one side. There we go. Bishop's mother and father are actually buried right over here in a little plot that's got a stone wall around it. So we were kind of happy when they moved the house down here that we felt like, okay, we got a connection still in the family there.
You know, in America, we don't have the preservation of antiquities that they have in Europe. Germans don't think a building's any good till it's at least 300 years old. Around here, after 50 years, we tear them down and build something new. So whenever you have a chance to preserve a piece of history, you'd like to preserve it.
So many Victorian homes have been torn down in this town and streets widened and everything. I think it's important to save what's left.
The Dupree House is a work of heart. This community has some great successes in preserving old buildings, historic buildings, but we've also had some sad examples where we have allowed very remarkable historic buildings to go away. That happily is not the case of the Dupree House, in large part because of the generosity and vision of VCOM and its leadership.
Our goal was to lead the restoration of the north side of the city of Spartanburg.
As time goes by, it's going to be even more important for people to see the history and hear the voices.
And by finishing the inside and maintaining as much of the integrity of the historic character as possible, then the house is not only viewable from the outside, but really usable from the inside.
We really do want to make it something that not only VCOM can enjoy, but the community can enjoy as well.
Well, I just hope that it's used for the community, and I hope that it brings VCOM and the city of Spartanburg together.
I think it's going to be a great point of interest, not only for the north side, but for the entire community.
One of the things we're doing is engaging the community a little in that decision process.
Restoring the Dupree House is it's a major expense, but I think at the end of the day, it'll be a beautiful historical home. It'll stand out.
It's been very exciting because the first time I went in, I guess it's been a year ago, and it needed a lot of work, and they've done a great job.
It's a wonderful thing to us. We never expected it to happen, and we're just very grateful that it did. Actually, the house probably is in better shape on the outside now than it ever was.
We're helping transform some of the living so that people can move back to the north side and live in the north side.
We want our faculty and students to want to live in north side and to further enhance the quality of downtown Spartanburg.
I think VCOM coming, I think a lot of people don't know how important they are. And I mean, it's just made all the difference in the world to the north side of Spartanburg.
It's been a great opportunity for us to come in an area of need and do what it is that we do best.
The spirit here is just wonderful, and we feel lucky to put our sail up and catch that wind to move forward. So we hope to be a continuing and increasing presence. As I said, we're just getting started. This is just phase one. We got miles to go before we sleep.